Hi, I'm Lucina Uddin, and I'm really excited to be back as part of the OHBM Mentoring Symposium to talk to you today about what I think is a really important problem in academia, patching the leaky academic pipeline. And you'll hear a lot about this from many of the other speakers as well. So I'd like to talk about some of the potential solutions that we can try to implement. And so my talk today will be about best practices for embracing diversity in academic societies. First, I just want to start with a brief introduction. I was actually born in Chittagong, Bangladesh, and my parents immigrated to the United States when I was an infant. I actually did my undergrad degree in neuroscience and psychology at the University of California, Los Angeles. Growing up in Southern California was very nice, so I went ahead and stayed there to complete my PhD in cognitive neuroscience at the same institution. After which I spent a few years at the New York University School of Medicine as a postdoctoral fellow in child psychiatry, followed by another postdoctoral position at Stanford University for a few years, after which I joined the faculty there in psychiatry before finally, oh, and I almost forgot the most important part. And during that time, I took a stint where I took a teaching position at the Asian University for Women, which was back in Bangladesh in my hometown. So I spent 6 months during 2010 teaching at that university, which was also really interesting and me after having growing up in the union. So I will come back to this, how this international experience affected my academic career and perspective over the years. But after that teaching stint, I came back to Stanford, and then finally I was able to move to the University of Miami and start my own research group, the Brain Connectivity and Cognition Lab, in 2014, where I've been ever since, with the exception of this past year where I've been on sabbatical. And so I'm currently a visiting scholar at UCSD, back again in Southern California. So the reason I mention all of these stops in my life and this origin story is because we all have our own origin story that imbues us with unique views and perspectives and gives us something that we can contribute to academia that only we can contribute. So no two people have this sort of exact same story, and it is exactly this diversity that makes us able to do the most innovative science. So the leaky pipeline is a problem that we've heard a lot about, and I want to focus more on solutions rather than on the origins of the issue. And I think the first thing to remember is that we have to actually care about it. And you may encounter some individuals who don't really care. It may be a minority of academics who don't think it's a big deal if we lose underrepresented minorities in the academic endeavor. But you'll find the majority of people do care about this and want to do something about it. And once we realize that this is a problem, we can act at many levels as individuals. We can act locally through our local institutions, and we can act globally and internationally through societies. And I think one important aspect of the leaky pipeline and why it occurs is a lack of mentoring and really hoping for allyship from those individuals who are in positions of power. So the OHBM student postdoc group has done a great job with this in terms of starting the mentorship program. And they published a really nice self-management guide for early career researchers last year. And this online mentoringship for early career researchers that's been going on for a while, trying to connect individuals all over the world at different career stages. And of course, you need mentorship at every aspect of the career, right? From graduate work to postdoctoral to even mid-career and later. It's always helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of different points. And we do these lunch with mentors every year. It used to be in person. The last one I attended in person was in Rome, but we're still doing this virtually, and it's been very successful. And in fact, we can reach a wider audience more globally with this virtual platform now. At the local level, where I am at the University of Miami, we have a diversity and equity committee that meets to engage in many activities that help to build a more cohesive culture and support students who come from historically underrepresented backgrounds. And so there's different levels at which you can get involved in these kinds of initiatives that provide mentoring at different levels. And I think we all sort of have these local organizations that we can really participate in if we care about the issue and we want to do what we can to support individuals who want to stay in academia. But really, structural change is a very important aspect to any diversity and inclusivity initiative. And at the OHBM, we started the OHBM Diversity and Inclusivity Committee a number of years ago, and summarized some of our activities in this paper that was published last year on how our organization in particular has been embracing diversity and inclusivity through things like childcare grants that make it easier for young parents to attend the conference, and workshops on different topics. And of course, the student postdoc group has been very involved in these, and as well as the Open Science special interest group. We had, for the first time, a diversity roundtable in Rome, where we talked about how we can use insights from social psychology and neuroscience to address gender bias. And we had the virtual diversity roundtable last year at our meeting that focused on LGBTQ and the neuroscience community. And for the first time this year, we'll have a roundtable focusing on racial bias in neuroscience. So you'll see, hopefully, you'll be able to participate in that symposium. And we have many members of the diversity committee who are also speaking in that symposium. But in terms of structural change, just changing the culture, changing the things that individual societies can do to make it easier for everyone to participate at the same level. That's sort of one of the ways in which we can help to, what I think of as one of the obstacles to the leaky pipeline is developing networks and understanding how to become integrated in a particular field. Earlier this year, I wrote a commentary with one of my colleagues, Andy de los Reyes, and we thought very carefully about this idea about who gets into the pipeline in the first place. And so there's many areas of gatekeeping. It starts from who gets into graduate school and what are the graduate admissions criteria. And then as you advance along, there's issues of faculty advancement. So who gets tenure and who gets promoted, and what are the criteria that we use to judge whether or not someone sort of makes it in this way. And these are all criteria that have been around for a long time. And when we think about revising or reevaluating them, that's a structural change that we can decide to make at the level of committees, at the level of institutions. There are some practices that have historically upheld inequities at multiple points. We've had a lot of discussion over the last year about the graduate record examination, or the GRE, and how that might further disadvantage some groups of students, and whether or not it makes sense to continue using such an exam when knowing what we do about the way it disadvantages some groups. So, and of course, the criteria for faculty advancement vary from institute to institute, but there are many aspects that are often not as considered in promotion than perhaps should be. For example, how much mentoring and what is the quality of mentoring that a faculty member has engaged in, and whether or not their efforts in community outreach or science communication are being considered for tenure. In fact, as we know, more often than not, it's just a matter of publications and grants, prestigious publications and big grants, and that's all the committees ever think about. But are there ways we can do more holistic reviews and think about more how an individual impacts, society, and what their contributions are across these different domains that might result in sort of more unbiased evaluations and broaden our acceptance of all these different kinds of contributions to science as being equally important. So structural change is harder to enact, but of course it's really necessary if we think about who we're losing in this leaky pipeline and why. And one thing I'm very excited about is this notion that we can think even bigger outside of our local institutions and outside of the societies like OHBM that we're a part of. And I like this quote about, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And here, the idea is that we can perhaps use our knowledge as a group of scientists rather than reinventing a code of conduct in every society or reinventing criteria for promotion and tenure at every group. We could have sort of more universal best practices. And one such initiative has already been started by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which is one of the large funding agencies in North America and the United States. And their idea was to talk to different organizations and different diversity committees at these different organizations to see how they could help us really enact some of the practices that each of the individual diversity committees has been trying to do on their own. So I was first speaking with some of the other chairs of organizations that also work in brain imaging. So the chair of the Flux Society for Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience and the chair of the Social and Affective Neuroscience Society and I met a few months ago to have a first discussion of how we can come up with more generalized recommendations for diversity committees to adopt across scientific societies so that each group doesn't have to essentially reinvent the wheel. And the role of NIDA or NIH or another large institution like that would be to help come up with these recommendations and ensure that they're being applied across different scientific societies so that we can really address the issue from a more global perspective and get more societies involved. So this is really an ongoing initiative or partnership across different academic societies that are involved in research, neuroscience and psychology and other fields as well. And looking at how these overarching funding agencies can perhaps help us to get closer to the goals of each of our individual committees. And so I think for me, I think of this as a committee or a group that would help us develop best practices for embracing diversity. And the best practice well known to the OHBM community. Many OHBM endorsed best practices groups. So there was years ago, the Committee on Best Practices in Data Analysis and Sharing was formed with the explicit goal of helping researchers to decide exactly what they would present in the methods sections of their papers. And that was a paper published a few years back. Tom Nichols was the lead and Thomas Yeo and others were involved. And that paper, Best Practices in Data Analysis and Sharing in Neuroimaging Using MRI, serves as a guide for people to report their individual study results. And there's a similar initiative for magneto and electroencephalography that was just recently published by Annette Puce and Cyril Pernette, which is, as you can see here, issues and recommendations from the OHBM COBIDAS MEG Committee for Reproducible EEG and MEG Research. And I think we very much like these kinds of papers that help us decide, what are the best ways for reporting our data so that we can ensure more robust and reproducible science. And there's another group that I formed recently with colleagues Nathan Spreng and Thomas Yeo called Best Practices on Large-Scale Brain Network Nomenclature. In fact, we have a poster describing our progress on this group so far, where we're going to be trying to come up with recommendations for the community on how to name and discuss and report results from human connectomic studies. And so we have a lot of experience, I think, as an OHBM community, thinking about ways to provide guidelines that will enhance science for everyone. And I think we can do really similar things in the space of diversity and equity and inclusivity. We can, like working with NIH or other groups who want to help us develop these best practices, come up with ways that would make the societies more welcoming and prevent the leaky pipeline as through mentoring and allyship and through grants and all kinds of extra support. And I think we already know how to come up with best practices, and we just have to now apply it to this domain. And I'm actually very optimistic that we'll be able to do that. And finally, there's a lot we can do as individuals. Sometimes it feels like we can't, but there's always ways that an individual can affect the outcome of and can affect societal change. And whether it's through voting in national or local elections, or what I love from the past year is the mayor of Washington, D.C. Is an individual who decided to make a statement about what matters to the city. And in fact, many cities then kind of adopted the same approach. And it is oftentimes just one individual who makes a decision, and then there becomes a movement or one individual or a group of individuals that can really start a movement. So I think we often forget how much power we might have as individuals to do this kind of thing. But I see it all the time in the OHBM community, especially from the early career researchers who are very aware and involved in these issues of trying to develop a culture of open and inclusive and community-driven neuroscience. So I know many of you folks are already thinking about these issues, and I wanted to remind you that you have more power than you think, because if you're a grad student today, you'll be a postdoc in coming years and possibly a principal investigator of your own lab, where you get to decide how you impact the lives of the trainees that you work with through inclusive practices and through mentoring. And as you get more and more senior, you become perhaps the chair of OHBM, or the editor of a major journal, or you sit on review boards where you're looking at grants and deciding who gets millions of dollars. At every step along the way, you have more and more power to make sure that individuals are receiving equitable access to all of these points, and all of these gatekeeping practices in academia are kept by individuals, and you probably will become one of those individuals one day. So it's just nice to keep in mind how much each person can contribute to this leaky pipeline problem. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to having a great discussion about these issues in the Q&A. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Antentor Hinton Jr., and most people call me AJ. I'm from the Department of Molecular Physiology and Biophysics at Vanderbilt University, and the title of my talk is Diversity Matters, but Don't Forget the Inclusion and Equity. This talk discusses why diversity is essential and why scientists should invest in equity and inclusion for all. Briefly, I wanted to kind of discuss my overall point, which is how individuals can support efforts to increase diversity at their institution, and what skills and tools are needed to focus on inclusion and equity. So I first want to just thank everyone from the symposium for offering me the opportunity to speak and to be able to sit on this amazing discussion panel related to what's going on in today's current society around diversity, equity, inclusion. I want to first give my thoughts on how we increase diversity. Diversity is happening all the time from these different initiatives. Currently, we're facing an initiative from the NIH where we're trying to fund Black scientists, which I, want to thank. We're also facing, issues related to the pandemic, and that's leading to a variety of different types of diverse individuals facing challenges that they may not have faced before. And then lastly, we're all faced with the opportunity to be able to create safe spaces for people from different ethnicities and races. All these topics are great, but if we don't get to the core of the issue, we'll never fix things. So how do we fix diversity? Well, the first thing is actually including inclusion and equity. So that means giving credit to the people that actually may have come up with the concept. For example, we're often talking about mentoring. We're always talking about how these things are so very important, but we don't give the credit that's it's due to. And a lot of times, a lot of African-American women or Black women are the ones that are suffering from not being able to be recognized in the spaces that they are. Well, we all are familiar with Science Twitter, which I really love. And there are a lot of different individuals that are across scientific Twitter that may not be as recognized as they should be for the work that they're doing in the spaces. I'm very grateful that myself, I was trained by Dr. Haiseta Schuler. I was also she's now a colleague before I was at Winston-Salem State. And now I work with her and other individuals like Dr. Sandra Murray. And one thing I want everyone to do is look around. The things that they see, when they see women in spaces in science, give credit to where it's due. If they make a discovery, if they are the ones that are important for a particular study to exist, give them the opportunity to be authors. Also give them the opportunity to be able to have the spotlight, the opportunity to communicate their work and cite them. So that is something that is not talked about. So this is one point that we can fix diversity by actually citing in the literature what women are able to contribute to science, which is an immense amount. And to that point, we also should think about how can we also help the other people that are in the diverse space. Well, that includes ethnicity and race. That also means to cite and fund their research. So we have to always think about that some issues may not be important to some, but it may be important to others. And that means including diversity of thought. So there was a study that was done in PNAS in 2020 that talks about innovation and how we get more innovation is by actually including diverse people from multiple backgrounds. That doesn't mean less qualified. That doesn't mean that, oh, we have to change how we think about things. It's allowing us to actually bring humanity back into diversity. And that's what we're missing. A lot of times we think about diversity in the context of a check mark, where we're focused on, oh, I have to have this particular individual from this background. I have to have this particular individual from this background. And then we're celebrating people that have Native American blood, or people that are African American, or people that are Latino. So we all have to be very careful when we're talking about individuals. People are people, and we shouldn't just label them by Indigenous, Black, Hispanic, Latino. We have to be careful about what we say and how we do things. People are individuals. Announce them by their name. Announce them by the things that they do. Give them their flowers while they're still there, okay? So that means if someone gets an award, retweet it. If someone gets paper, read it. If it's worth citing, which I think most of the time, a lot of the data can speak for itself, cite it. You know, there's not an opportunity that could be missed. And that is the first step of actually making sure that diversity matters. Also, inviting individuals that do excellent science to symposiums and conferences like this one to speak about their research. Not only diverse topics are so very important. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into the context of diversity. One thing that I want to talk about are 4 amazing Black women that are not often talked about in spaces are cited. We're all now getting used to hearing about Berunda Montgomery. Dr. Berunda Montgomery is an amazing individual. And we're also I want to just put a little tad bit that we should talk about not only celebrating their research, but also their initiatives out in the public spaces, like her book. So besides just talking about Dr. Berunda Montgomery and just mentioning her name, I want to talk about the work that she's been doing for such a long time. A lot of individuals are now just starting to recognize that she really knows what she's talking about with mentoring, and she's been doing this before it was even popular. So what does that word mean, before it was popular? That is the thing that we have to think about. Give credit to the individuals that actually were doing the work way belong that I was doing work in this space, or even thought about it, or other individuals as well. We always have to give flowers to the individual that deserves it, meaning cite, support, and promote. And then also, let's talk about other women in this space. Let's talk about Dr. Ebony McGee. She has been doing this work. She's at Vanderbilt, by the way. She has been doing a lot of work in this space for so long, and now she's starting to get the recognition that she deserves. One thing is the same way that I talked about Dr. Berunda Montgomery, you should cite her as well. Dr. Ebony McGee is amazing. I've cited a lot of her work, and I will to cite her work because it is an important value to a lot of qualitative and quantitative research that I do in the space of mentoring and diversity, equity, inclusion. Besides these 2 individuals, there are other individuals that I would suggest that you cite as well. One of those individuals would be Dr. T.K. Francis, where she's created this program and this model called PRISM to actually educate the community about how to interact with undergrads, how to mentor them. And then also she's created this concept called equity-minded mentorship. And that is something that we all should really think about. But we all have to be aware that there are individuals that are not as talked about, like Dr. Francis, that should be more out there in the public, and we should cite the things that she does. But another individual that we all should think about is just other people that are in the diverse space. I mentioned Dr. Berunda Montgomery, I mentioned Dr. Ebony McGee, and I mentioned Dr. Berunda Montgomery. We all think that these individuals are anomalies, but there are a lot of individuals that have been studying various topics for such a long time. And I want everyone to be aware that these opportunities do exist to cite people, to actually create opportunities for individuals to speak at conferences. Use the 1,000 Black scientists list as one of the examples that could be for Black scientists, and all the Black scientists that are not on that list, celebrate them as well, because the list could even grow. And I also want to talk about, in the context of my Latin brothers and sisters, we all need to think about that, how we represent them. Don't assume, if they speak Spanish, don't assume that they speak English. Just talk to them as a normal person. Stop creating these microaggressions around, oh, you speak exceptional because I would figure that you did this or that. That means just be on your P's and Q's. So the first point I'm making is cite women, help women to be able to be uplifted and showcased for their talent. The second point I'm making is also talk about diverse individuals. Diversity matters, but in the context of actually not promoting only, but also supporting in the context of their work, citing it. So that's the first point. Continue to know that diversity matters, but we have to pay it forward in the context of actually not performative action, but actual real action. Then the next thing is talking about a lot of the difficult things that we don't want to talk about. Chanda Prescott Winston does that the best. So I would really say follow a lot of the things she talks about. She raises issues in diversity long before diversity was popular, in my opinion, and it's a phenomenal thing to be around someone that does that. So again, go out and support, but also in the same context, be willing to have a conversation about the science. Know that these individuals are scientists as well. Don't only think of them as someone that does diversity, equity, inclusion, but also think about them doing their science. So the next point is inviting individuals to talk about their science as well as their research in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, and mentoring. You have to be able to talk about both. This is not only an opportunity to be able to uplift diverse matters, but also uplift the scientific space so that the scientific space is no longer a scientific diaspora where we're devoid of individuals from diverse backgrounds. Also, another thing in the diverse space, we need to now think about how to have inclusive environments. So a lot of times within the infrastructure of institutions, there will be sometimes individuals that are from diverse backgrounds that make it to a chair position, but then when they make it to other areas, they're not. So we have to be aware that there are individuals that are from various backgrounds that deserve opportunities at the chair level, the dean, and also at the chancellor level. We have to be accustomed to realizing that anybody qualified should not only be thought of as an outstanding candidate, but not exceptional before their race, but just an exceptional candidate. We have to stop qualifying our intentional but yet unintended biases. And so this is something that we have to really figure out where we can focus on and tackle. So in the inclusion space, I'm urging you all to think about the infrastructure. When there's opportunities to vote for someone that could be a diverse candidate in a department, don't be hesitant to actually invite them for a faculty talk. Create a seminar series that's not just gauged on, Black individuals or Latinx individuals, and create it as a space for everyone. And also be willing to actually back these grant initiatives. So within the infrastructure, again, we're talking about the infrastructure to create true change. Performative action is where we may actually go out and acquire diverse awards, but we don't celebrate those individuals, but we do check them off for that. Saying, okay, yeah, they did this, and you promote them for that time period during certain months, but promote individuals throughout the year. Don't only do it for performative action, because that is somewhere where we fail. And we have to be willing to, do it on the months that not necessarily are the historical months, like Black History Month or Juneteenth, or Pride Month, or for example, during the week of Kwanzaa or the week of another particular holiday, like Three Kings. We have to be willing to actually just celebrate everyone consistently throughout the year. So that is really what an inclusive space means. And it means that you have to be culturally competent. So another individual that I would suggest that we all check out is Dr. Angela Byers-Winston. She is the one that is the originator of the cultural competence training and the cultural competent mentoring. So that means that we are actually creating a space where everyone can thrive. And we have to be able to really take trainings and be a part of the new plan for mentorship. And when you invite cultural competency within your space, you're able to create an environment of intentional mentoring, something that I've coined. And that also gives you a better space to have value-based mentoring, meaning that you put the values of the individual forward that you're trying to create a nice career plan for, instead of just only creating a clone of yourself. So it also means that intentionality matters, not only in the inclusion space, but also equity, which I have been talking about all this time. We have to give opportunities to everyone. And we have to also be willing to know that this opportunity that is given is not just because of a diverse hire. So what's next in diversity? I talk about these concepts, and I'm just giving you a snapshot because we'll be on the discussion panel. But the reason I'm telling you about why diversity matters, why inclusion matters, and equity matters is because there will be a point in time where we'll get past these things related to color issues. We have to kind of start digging deeper into the family of issues that are around and related to these isms. A lot of times that within individual races, we deal with things related to colorism. We're focused on how, as a society, that Black is wrong and white is right. These things have got to stop being the definitions in the book that we call the dictionary. We have to be more accustomed to be willing to focus on how everyone can work together, how everyone has to realize that Black can be good, absence of a color can be good, brown can be good, white can be good. We're all equal and we all have to think that way. So that means getting back to humanity. When we get back and invested in humanity, diversity, equity, inclusion are all things that matter inside of this space. And we'll all be able to actually think more clearly about how we interact with other individuals that are from different cultural backgrounds and have different traditional values than us. And also, I would just simply say, if you don't know where to start, just pick up a book. All these books that have been placed around during the pandemic around these racial inequities and challenges that are going on and faced, people have put out many books. And so I just encourage you to read one and read someone's experience so that we're more accustomed to actually understanding what it means to have a skill set and tools. So eventually, one way to develop your skill sets and tools, tool belt, is to read papers that come from these individuals that I've mentioned and other individuals such as myself. But also, how do we actually increase the pipeline? Well, to increase the pipeline, it means to be culturally competent and aware of when individuals may face a challenge and provide them the resources and opportunities to do that. So champion for other individuals. That's a tool that you actually can take on at any time. It's a growth mindset, not having a fixed mindset around what an individual can do, but also what an individual's potential may be that can actually achieve something. So gauge things maybe off of potential for a change instead of making these, pre-assumptions that someone knows something and then actually leading to a microaggression where you're invalidating who they are as a scientist. So I just want you all to think about these things and think that diversity matters, but don't forget about the inclusion and equity that we have in these spaces. And I also want you all to remember that we also think about sponsorship and allyship as loose terms, but I want you to think about, in order to have proper humanity in the scientific workforce, we all will have to face these challenges head on. It's going to take more than just understanding about how negative mentoring works and actually doing the opposite to have exceptional intentional mentors. It's also going to take more than just an equity-minded mentorship or a holistic mindset. It's going to take more than just cultural competency, and it's going to take more about understanding the STEM education field. It's actually going to take an interdisciplinary approach, which means you and I have to have a conversation to be able to create an environment where the institutional infrastructure is not based for just one set of individuals to actually achieve, but is set up for everyone to achieve. This doesn't take an advantage away from a particular group or not. It actually encourages, just like the PNAS paper from 2020 says, that it increases diversity, and diversity increases innovation, which is what we want at the end of the day. We want to be scientists that are empowered to do great and phenomenal things. And above all, like you can see in the amazing picture that I have, remember to give everyone their flowers. That's also why I'm wearing this shirt. So it's an honor to speak with you today about diversity and why it matters, but also not forgetting the points about inclusion and equity. So I look forward to challenging you all to participate in the discussion panel, and also looking forward to having a great conversation about other skills and tools that we can incorporate in our training, actually to be able to pay it forward and push the pipeline together and patching the leaks that we call the leaky pipeline. So I enjoy this conversation, and I hope to actually look forward to talking more with you all about these spaces and what we can do to be successful in them. Thank you for your time. And if you have any other questions after the discussion panel, if we're able to get to everything, you can email me at my Gmail or my Vanderbilt email or my Iowa email. Thank you so very much. I hope that you all have an excellent day, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Hi everyone, I'm Angeline Dukes. Today my presentation focuses on undervalued work and unsung heroes. So to start off, I want to kick off with a thought exercise. So I want you to start thinking about your day-to-day duties of your job, whether it's full-time research or taking classes, whatever it is your job requires. I want you to think about how exhausted you feel from it sometimes, how much your feet hurt and your back hurts, and how there just seems to be never enough hours in the day to get everything done. How much work and energy you put in to the point where you just can't wait to take a day off. Now that you've thought about that, I want you to think about what if, on top of all of that, you had to mentor students that aren't yours. You had to do necessary, consistent outreach. You had to battle sexism and racism and other daily forms of discrimination. You had to educate your community and a bunch of other communities. You had to teach others how to be anti-racist. You were constantly being asked to serve on committees and panels and so many other things. And here's the kicker, you had to do all of that without any extra pay or accolades. So it won't count towards your promotion or tenure. And if you're a student, it doesn't count towards you graduating. It might not even count towards you getting a job in the future because some institutions and companies don't value that service. So now how do you feel? Would you be tired, frustrated, annoyed? Wonder why even bother if it doesn't count for anything? I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, if it doesn't count, then I'm just not going to do it. But unfortunately, this extra workload is the reality for most Black and Brown people in higher education. And we don't have the luxury of just not doing it. This work is necessary and it's important, and it needs to be done to make academia and society better as a whole. And the question isn't, why do we keep doing it? The question is, why isn't it valued enough? So when we look at the breakdown of full-time faculty nationally, right, we see that Black and Hispanic men and women make up only 3% each, 3% each of full-time faculty. And don't even get me started on the abysmal numbers for Indigenous people. And although they make up such a small percentage, we know that they're often the ones who are asked to be doing the most service, right? They become unofficial mentors for Black and Brown students. They serve on DEI committees. They challenge the status quo of academia. And often they do this without proper support. And not only that, but it's usually unpaid work, right? And it sometimes doesn't count for tenure. And sometimes it's not even acknowledged. And unfortunately, several studies have also shown that BIPOC PIs, in particular Black professors, receive not just lower salaries, but also fewer grants, and they're less likely to be cited. So they're battling not just the time commitments of the extra work, but also trying to have to deal with their regular research being properly funded and cited and recognized. And you don't just have to take my word for it. There are tons of articles written by BIPOC trainees and faculty talking about this, right? And there are also lots of articles that emphasize how important these underrepresented faculty are to the success of future students. And we also mention a lot of things about how all faculty can support BIPOC trainees and BIPOC faculty so that the burden isn't just on them. And so there's a ton of research out there. I hope that you do take some time to go into that. But for right now, what I want to focus on is this concept of a leaky pipeline. And quite honestly, I hate that metaphor. And the reason for that is because it seems very passive, right? It's not like people are just dripping out. And I feel like it makes excuses for the detrimental systemic practices that forcibly push Black and Brown scholars out of their field. People leave when they're not valued and they're not respected. They leave when their ideas are ignored and the change that they're pushing for gets swept under the rug. They leave when their pay does not reflect all of the hard work that they're doing and when they're not properly being supported by their departments and their colleagues. They leave when they're being denied tenure or promotion because their revolution in changing the face of science and academia and making these spaces safer, unfortunately, it doesn't have a high enough impact factor, right? And it's just not enough for people to consider it worthy for these promotions. And so it's not a leak, it's them being pushed out. And I'm personally feeling the weight of this myself. So last summer, during the height of all the racial tension and police brutality being magnified on social media, I was a PhD student preparing to advance to candidacy. So I needed to focus on that. But I was also a Black woman. And for me, this meant that my energy and my mental and emotional well-being, my fears, everything was not focused on anything academically, right? I was afraid for my own life, that of my husband and my brothers and my friends and my family. I was furious about how we were being killed in the streets and systemically abused in academia. And so many stories came pouring in from Black academics fighting against racism within their own institutions and being questioned by campus police on whether or not they even belong in these workspaces. So I gave my energy to demand that these conversations take place at my own institution. I took myself, the only other Black woman in my cohort, and the one Black faculty that we could find, who, mind you, wasn't even in our school, she was in the medical center side. And we put together a whole discussion on being anti-racist. No one asked us to, we weren't being paid for it, but we did it because we felt like it was necessary and important. And it was very well received and well attended, but it came at a cost. I ended up pushing back my advancement, and I ended up in way more meetings and giving other talks and presentations than I intended to. And I'm still doing that now, right? I'm still pushing for change at my institution and helping other underrepresented students around the world do the same. And this takes time and energy. And the cognitive toll that this work requires can be distracting. It is exhausting. And I'm personally feeling the burnout myself. And I'm still just a graduate student, but I can't stop doing the work. That is impossible. It needs to be done, and I know that I'm making a difference, but it still won't help me graduate. I don't get an increase in my stipend, and my dissertation committee still expects scientific papers to be published. So I still have all of my regular work to do to be a successful graduate student, and this extra burden of making science more equitable. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't enjoy it, right? I know how important both of these things are, but it's very time-consuming and honestly draining. And so when we talk about this leaky pipeline in academia and in STEM in particular, it's not that Black women and other underrepresented groups don't want to be here. We do. We chose these career paths for a reason. We love the research that we do. We know that we can make important impacts in the field, but the other work that we have to do alongside it isn't appreciated. It doesn't count for anything that matters in academia. And that's my big point for this talk. If you want us to stay, you need to help demand change for this extra work to actually count. And so here are just a couple of things that I think you can do, right? I want you to think about what you're actually doing now. What are you doing to support BIPOC students and colleagues? What are you doing to ensure hiring and retention are equitable processes? How are you holding your department and institutions accountable? And if you haven't already started thinking about them, here are a couple of things that I came up with that I hope can help you. So number one, you should really be demanding change for hiring, promotion, and graduation. Because this service that we're doing, all of this extra work, as important as we know it is, all of the outreach, all of the mentoring, all of the things that don't normally count, they need to be valued. And it should be a requirement, and people should be held accountable for actually doing the work, because it's a great way to showcase these efforts that Black and Brown scholars are doing. And it'll also help ease the burdens, because now everyone has to share those responsibilities. Everyone has to do it in order for them to be able to be promoted, for them to be able to graduate, for them to be able to do these things. And so now the burden isn't just on us, it's on everyone. Number two, I want you to think about your biases, especially when it comes to interviewing and hiring and serving on promotion committees and graduate school admissions committees, because I want you to think about, are you only selecting students who have had the time and the financial resources to be able to volunteer in lab or to be able to just focus on the science? Are you dismissing students who might not have had access to the same opportunities to have lengthy research training, but demonstrate their work ethic and dedication in other ways? Are you ignoring all of the other work that these students are putting in other parts of their lives? And number three, you should be demanding this accountability from your institutions and programs, making sure that everyone gets an equitable chance. follow up on them. In those statements that they put out last year, are they really doing the things that they said that they would be? Are they hiring more Black people, recruiting more Black students, and putting programs into place that will actually help retain them? Are you, as a PI, as a peer, making effort to cite Black scientists and brown scientists and Indigenous scientists? Are you asking to collaborate with them and invite them to seminar series to speak and inviting them to speak at conferences? Are you giving them a platform and allowing them to use their voices to showcase their talents? Are you helping ease the burdens of the extra work by volunteering with groups that serve underrepresented communities? Are you actually showing up? Because this isn't a one and done thing. Systemic racism is so deeply ingrained in all facets of society, including academia, and it's going to take work, and everyone needs to be willing to put in that work. And finally, one thing that you can always do to support is to continue supporting BIPOC-led initiatives that amplify and build a community for these scholars, right? For Black trainees, for Indigenous trainees, for Hispanic and Latinx trainees, for everyone, right? All of these underrepresented groups, for disabled trainees, for anyone that you could possibly think of. There are so many groups out there now, which is absolutely fantastic, but they need to be supported. They need your support in order to continue to thrive. They need access to resources and funding and people to volunteer and give their time. And these are great ways that you could actually make a difference. And so I really want to emphasize Black in Neuro because, of course, I'm the president and founder of Black in Neuro. We specifically focus on supporting Black scholars in neuroscience related fields, and we have Black in Neuro Week 2021 coming up. So please follow us on Twitter at Black in Neuro. We also have a YouTube page that has a ton of different resources and panels that focus on things like mentorship, why it's important, how to effectively do it in underserved communities that doesn't bring harm to those communities. And so these are the types of efforts that we try to do to make sure that these spaces are safe and that they're equitable. And so from this talk, I hope that it has encouraged you to take action to make academic spaces more equitable and diverse. I hope that you realize that this leaky pipeline thing is a myth, and rather there are systemic changes that need to occur to stop people from being pushed out. And I hope you start thinking today of things that you can do better to support your colleagues and your students by valuing the work that they do outside of the lab and the classroom. I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this talk, and I'm more than glad to take any questions that you might have.